Well, Rivermen Day is taking a stop all the way back to the IHL now. We are chatting and joined by the 1996 Peoria Rivermen Hall of Fame inductee, number 14, Dave Thomlinson. And Dave, this is awesome to get the chance to meet you because you're a legend in this city. And thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us.
Well, thanks, Andrew. It's nice to meet you, and it's good to see Dave again.
Older and better, right, Dave?
You bet.
Well, I want to test your memory right off. This is something that played over the PA at Carver Arena about every time you took the ice.
Okay, let's hear it. You know, Dave, that played every time. Back in the day, the MTV line was, and I'll tell you, Chaser and Brucey and Nelly thought they should be, but we were the first power play unit. And it got so that even before Bobby had thrown us out there that last year, that the PA announcer would start playing "I Want My MTV" once the referee called a penalty.
Yeah.
And we would just jump out there, and they couldn't really do anything about it.
That kind of summarizes that line. No, the opposing teams couldn't do anything about it. Michel Mongeau, the center, Dave Thomlinson, and Jimmy Vesey was the MTV line, which we dubbed that in the paper in my greatest moment.
Yeah, that was good. I mean, I think we were probably breaking some trademark laws and stuff like that.
Yeah,
A whole bunch of T-shirts and pictures, and I don't think MTV was too worried about it. Maybe it was good publicity for them too.
Well, it was the greatest line, certainly in Rivermen history, and I still maintain possibly the greatest for any minor league team, certainly that I've seen over 35 years. And what was it the three of you guys had?
You know, it all came together. It just came together somehow. Like, I think you've asked me this question before when we were doing it, and I think my answer was, you know what? Like, it was the sum of its parts, because okay, Monji was great, Vise could score goals, and I worked hard. But you put the three of us together, and all of a sudden we all elevated ourselves to the MTV line. Like, it wasn't now just one guy being his own, you know, bringing what he could bring to the table. I mean, we all did that, but you put us all together, and we had some magic. I'd go in the corner, get the puck, get it to Monji, he'd get it to Vise, and it'd be in the back of the net. And then when we got on the power play together, that last year, and you know, it just clicked. It just clicked. One of the only regrets that we had as a group was, if you remember that last year, Jimmy's mom got sick, so he had to leave for a while. He didn't play the full season with us. I think he still scored 35 or 40 goals, but he didn't play a significant chunk because his mom was quite ill back home, so he had to go home. But he was back for the playoffs and, you know, back for a good part of the season. But the years leading up to it, and like, we played 3 years together, and it was magic. It was awesome.
To illustrate just how good that line was, especially on a power play, you scored 27 goals, power play goals, just power play goals. Well, one guy, 27 of them, which was an IHL record.
Yeah, if you look back at my stats, Bobby always, we've had of course, you win a championship with a group of guys, you stay together. Now with the technology that everyone has, we're texting. And last year, Bobby, on the night of the anniversary of us winning the cup, got a whole bunch of addresses from, phone numbers from Kelly Chase, and sent out a 20-person text list and said, "What were you guys doing? What were you guys doing 29 years ago last year?" Right? And so then we just sat back, and I got in my garage and just let the text roll. Right, I was reading them more than sending them, but. What I was going to say is just like that the power play, the MTV line, all that, Bobby put us together, and Bobby said, "You guys run the power play, And because he said, I've never been on a power play. You run the power play. We'll go from there. And the stat that I was going to bring up there that Bobby always liked to say is, if you look at my first 3 seasons in the IHL, I scored 27 goals each year. That's it, though. Yeah. And Bobby said, oh, I can get him that on the power play, for crying out loud. So he liked that one.
Dave, hearing you talk about this, it's very evident your passion for the Peoria Rivermen. And go back, though, to those days as we are reminiscing. You talk about getting in the garage, texting these guys, 29 years after winning that Turner Cup. Do you ever get like emotional about looking back at all that? Because there was a lot of history there. You want to talk about your records and power play goals, as Cleve was bringing it up. I mean, that team set a ton of records, including one that stood over 20 years with that win streak.
Yeah, I mean, the power play record was probably about the smallest record that we set that year, right? Everybody in that dressing room, was part of huge records, and then there was individual records. You got Brucey, and we got Nelly, and just almost every player on that team is part of all the records we set. And I'm pretty passionate about that team especially. But I was blown away by my 4 years that I spent in Peoria. 3 of them weren't, one of them obviously stands out, but even the tough years, Dominic Lavoie and I played the 4 years together. And that's one thing. I've been in touch with Dom even, from in this last year quite a bit. And, going through some tough times always makes the good times even that much better. And no one went through tougher times than Dom and I did. I mean, one year I think we lost 24 out of 26 games. And then to come back and win 18 in a row, we were 18-1 after 19 games that first year. And it was like, okay, we got to win this now. We got to win the whole thing. And then we did. And him and I going through, Jabber was there for a bit that first year, but those were only 3 guys. But then every year we seemed to add some guys. We added Weiss and Chaser and Twister and I'm going to miss guys' names, Guy Hebert, Scarda. Everybody was added as we went, like year 2, year 3, and then year 4, getting Brucey and Nelly. And it just pushed us all over the top because all of us guys had gone through some we'd become a pretty tight team. Well, we were a pretty tight team right from the start. Even when our record didn't show it, we were learning, right? We were learning how to be a pro team and how to be a tight team. And I'll tell you right now, there were years, like most of my years playing in Peoria, we were the toughest team in the IHL. That's a fact. You can't have Tony Twist, Kelly Chase, Darren Taylor, Robert Dirk, Igor Sommier. These are, some of those guys didn't play on the Turner Cup winning team, but in my 4 years, I never had to worry about too much, the fact that we weren't the toughest team on the ice.
It's amazing too, because, as you were talking about your 4 years there, I want to know what you think, and we kind of already are talking to you about that 1990 team, but is it lightning in a bottle given that the 2 years prior, I think the team had lost over 50 games in both of the seasons prior to winning the championship. So it almost feels like it comes out of nowhere, or did you see it coming down the road?
Right. And it is kind of that circular, it didn't come out of nowhere because we were setting it up for 3 years with the base group of guys. But then in one sense, it did come out of nowhere because we got Nelly, who the guys on the team, we didn't know Nelson Emerson was going to be who he was. And then we got Brucey, David Bruce, who was going to know he was going to score 66 or 64, whatever he got, goals. Those 2 guys put Kelly Chase on that line, and that's a line, that was one of the great things, and Dave will remember this. That was one of the great things in the dressing room there. So there's the MTV line, and then there's Kelly, Nelly, and Brucey. And in the day, the, pseudo, whoever, number 1 line in practice always wore the red sweaters. So we always had the red sweaters. They had green ones. And then they said, Well, you know what? I think things have changed here, boys. I think the green sweater is now the number one line. The two lines went back and forth like it was perfect. I mean, we all loved each other. We were all part of the same team, but we wanted to outdo them just as much as they wanted to outdo us on the ice for the team, right? So the internal competition that last year with these new guys, pushed us over the top. Like that made, like, if you look at the top 10 scorers, and again, if Vise had played the whole year, he'd have been up there with Mongie and Brucey. The internal competition was fantastic, and everyone got along, but we wanted to show them every night that we were the true number one line, and they wanted to show us that you guys are old news. We're the new number one line, and it was amazing. So to answer, that's a long-winded explanation to answer this. Did it come out of nowhere? I would argue no, because we had put the pieces in place. I mean, our goalies were still the same goalies. Our defense was pretty well the same defense until we got Darren Veach, who another guy there that was the last piece of the puzzle that year. Without him, we probably don't win. It was just, Bobby and the management and all that, and they just added the right guys at the right time. So I would argue it no, it didn't, but we certainly didn't expect to get the contributions from the new guys that we did, because they were off the charts.
That team had lost 14 straight the year before. And I remember asking Wayne Thomas, what do you think you have with this team? Assess it. And he said, well, we're slow, but we're small. And a lot of people don't realize that Wayne Thomas
he gets lost
that year.
He gets lost in the mix, yeah.
Yeah, he built a lot of that team.
He built 90% of that team.
Yeah, very much. And that team was so good, to give you another perspective on it, that they had an NHLer playing on the third line, the checking line, in Steve Tuttle, who scored 24 goals on that team. That was the third line unit. You had four guys in Guy Hebert, John Blue played on that team, Pat Jablonski, Tom Draper, all NHL goaltenders. John
Blue didn't lose a game that year for us. I think he was 4-0. But
4-0 and said, "Peace, I'm out." So I mean, it was an incredible game. I can remember that there were a dozen NHL scouts in the building every night to see those guys, and I interviewed quite a bit of them, and they would say this is essentially an NHL expansion team that would win 20 games in the NHL right now if they played that way. And
I remember you writing that, and I remember hearing about that. And if I recall correctly, it was an expansion year as well, because I think San Jose was coming in the next year.
Correct.
I'm not sure if Ottawa was coming in as well. If they can, I can't remember that specific. But I know Brucey went to Ottawa.
Yeah, 12 of you guys the next year.
Brucey went to San Jose.
Yeah.
After the year, and geez, I can't recall if it was Tampa Bay or Ottawa that were also on the docket there, because I thought anyways, there were a lot of scouts. We were a hot commodity to watch. But just going back to Wayne Thomas for a second there, Dave, you're absolutely right. What he did, we had, because my first coach was Pat Kelly, legend in his own right in Peoria, right? And, then we had Wayne for 2 years after that. And Wayne really took the time. Like, our practices were different than with Bobby, right? With Wayne, we worked on individual skills. He was really all about teaching. Well, he taught, the team game, but also teaching, trying to get, he spent a lot of time with each guy trying to say, I think you can be better. You got to put yourself into this, and here's what you maybe want to work on. Wayne was great for that. And that's what I think, that's why I say he built 80 to 90% of that team, because he took the time to teach. He was teaching those 2 years. Just going back to that 12 or 14 game loss.
Right. I
think we lost 12 in a row, won 2, and then lost 14 in a row. Like I say, we lost 26 out of 28 or 24 out of 26 games, something like that. 2 12-game losing streaks sandwiched around 2-game winning streak.
Yeah, and he told me one night, he said, I could let these guys go out and mess it up out there and just to break the streak. But he said,
we could have.
I don't want him to do that. I want him to stay committed to the system we're teaching, to play Blues hockey, and let them see that they can succeed at it.
And that I would back that up 100%, that Wayne really cared about the guys individually and about teaching us the way the Blues played and how best each player could possibly fit into that system, right? He identified what your strengths were and what your weaknesses were, and from goalie all the way out to defense and center, right? Even though he was a goalie when he was playing, Wayne knew what he was doing as a coach. The funny thing there is that when they promoted Wayne, like the middle of August that year in 90, and there was no time to get anybody else, like to put out any kind of, job search. So they looked around the office, and Bobby had been our director of player personnel all the time anyway. So he knew all of this, and they're like, okay, Bobby, you're going down there to coach. He's like, what?
Yeah, Bobby says that he goes, we were in a meeting, and they said, who's going to go down to Peoria? And he said, I was looking down at my sheet of paper, and it got quiet. And I looked up, and they were all staring at me. You guys have often said that team doesn't win 18 straight games if it had somebody other than Bobby Plager. What
I was just going to say,
what was it about Plager that made him the right guy for that team?
I was just going to say that, Dave. We don't win 18 in a row. We also, maybe we do, maybe we don't, but we don't win the league running away like we did. And then we also don't win the playoffs, given the way they started, how we had guys, like we had the Milwaukee fiasco there where we kind of lost home ice, even though we had run away with the league. If you recall that first round, there was, I don't know, something, scheduling difficulties or something. And so Milwaukee got like the first 3 out of 5 games at home, if I recall.
Yeah.
The big kerfuffle about that. Jabber and Chaser and I think, I'm not sure, no, Nelly was down, but we had gotten called up just for the playoffs, or in my case, just for the playoffs, Jabber. And so we lost a lot of guys. We don't win that Turner Cup the way we did. We were down 3-2 to Phoenix. And just
2-0 and going out for 3 games.
That's right.
Yeah.
And just Bobby was the perfect coach for that team. We don't do what we did without Bobby. It's just impossible.
Dave, I was looking upon kind of doing research about you to be ready for this interview. There's Where Are They Now that Dave Aminian wrote about you 10 years ago. And one of the things that it says, talking about your passion for Peoria, is that you had so many firsts there. It was your first pro city, first pro goal, your first call up to the NHL comes through Peoria. Tell me about just kind of like hockey is so different now than what it was in the late 80s and the early 90s. What was it like being a kid moving out to the Midwest of Illinois, in central Illinois, being a Riverman?
Well, it was intimidating to start with. I can tell you that for sure, because I'd moved away. I had to sort of, back in those days, kind of a classic Canadian Western Hockey League story where, at 14, I left home, moved away about 3 hours to a tier 2 team, like a junior B team or junior, they call it junior A, and then they call it Western Hockey League. So, but to play in the Alberta Junior Hockey League. So I'm living 4 hours away from my parents. I'm 14 years old. I'm going to a new school. I'm living with a new family. And that was kind of a typical way you did it back then. And then from there, I moved on to the Western Hockey League, played with Brandon and Moose Jaw. And I got drafted by the Leafs in the 3rd round in when I was playing with Brandon. But that didn't work out. I went to 2 training camps, but they didn't seem interested. And so I went back and what was called playing overage. So I was playing as a 20-year-old. That's the limit you can go to in junior. And Teddy Hampson from the St. Louis Blues was scouting then in the West, and him and my agent got together and they got me a contract. So now, like, even I'd been to training camp in Toronto twice, but that was just for, 2 weeks at a time and back to Moose Jaw or Brandon to play hockey. But now I know, now I've actually signed a pro contract. I'm not coming home after 2 weeks, right? I'm either staying in St. Louis, which would have been a super long shot, or I'm going to Peoria. And like, I pretty well knew I was going to go to Peoria. And I will tell you this, even like you say, there's a change in hockey from now to then, obviously. There was a change in hockey from my first year to my second year, to be honest. The IHL was just starting to become a real development league in the NHL. My first year here, it was still the remnants of being, and this isn't disparaging or anything like that. It's just the way that the leagues are listed. You got the NHL, the American League, and then at the time it was the IHL, and then the East Coast. But the IHL had elevated itself in my second year to being absolutely on par with the American League. Whereas that first year, it would have been, if you wanted to rank them, it probably was the third league, right? NHL, American League, and then IHL. So that was a little different experience as well, because there were some holdovers from, a pretty tough league. Dave will know this because he covered it all. But, what, Bob the Hammer Fleming, I didn't play against Bob or play with Bob, but there's an era of hockey there where the Peoria Rivermen were led by, again, some really tough guys. And that league was really tough back when I first started that first year. And if you chat with Dom, Dave, I'm sure he would mention the same thing, that league went from being, a real, how do I say this, second development league to when our second and third and fourth years, now where more NHL teams are putting their first farm teams in the IHL, and it becomes absolutely on par with the American Hockey League, and then surpasses them it really went on quite a trajectory, right, where we had, 20 teams. We went from 8, or maybe we started with 9 teams.
Yeah, 9 to
nine.
A true national league.
Yeah, 20. Orlando Solar Bears, San Diego Gulls, we were coast to coast. Detroit Vipers, Albany Choppers were even in there for a couple months.
Houston, Chicago, all those.
Right. Oh, Chicago Wolves. And some of those have done, and some of them are still there, obviously. But there was a real change that when Dom and I were playing, there was a real change in the air, right? Because our first year, the only 2 teams that had NHL teams down in the I were Minnesota had Kalamazoo and St. Louis had Peoria. And Calgary was, I think, mostly Salt Lake, so 2.5. Within a year, almost every team is affiliated with an NHL team. So the IHL really took off while I was there.
What about?
Go ahead, Andrew.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to quickly kind of follow on that though. You talk about your firsts. I mean, being away from home, and now not just 3-4 hours away. Now we're talking quite a hike to Peoria, Illinois. What was life like though, as a player in the 80s? What did the boys do after the games on the off days? How was that?
Well,
within restrictions.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you the Hockey News used to do. This is back when you probably don't even remember this, Andrew. There used to be a national sort of paper in Canada, and it was sold in the U.S. as well, called the Hockey News. I mean, and now I think it's part of Sports Illustrated website, right?
I have one right here with me, convenient.
Yeah, that's a newfangled one. In the old days, they used to actually be like newsprint. And that's where Bob McKenzie used to be like the hockey editor. This would have been back like well,
it was through the early 90s because I worked I was the IHL correspondent for them. Yeah.
So what I was going to say is they do these funny what leagues sort of, they would poll the players and what would the players in the IHL say about this and the American League and the NHL. And I remember the one really cool thing was the favorite restaurant in all of the IHL, like they polled all the players. You'll remember it, Dave, Alexander's Steakhouse in Peoria.
Great steak.
They said the headline was, now I'll leave it up to you to determine which bar was the favorite one, but it was a bar, I think it was in Colorado or Salt Lake City, but I'll let people can do research on that one. But the headline was pretty cool. It was I'll leave out the first part, but they like their meat raw. You got to cook it yourself. Yeah. So we were still a pretty tough crew in the eye. But going back to just first, like I bought my first real car I bought in Peoria. And I had my first apartment because when I was playing junior, I lived in a
like a billet
with a family. Yeah. Billet family. So I lived with Mark Dumont my first year. And then the next 3 years I lived with Pat Jablonski was my roommate. We were pretty tight and became great friends and still are. But just, yeah, everything, like I opened my first bank account, all that, like all these things that people do when they're, a little bit younger than, I guess I was 20 when I went out there. And, but just living away from home with no parental guidance, no no billet family kind of thing was a little intimidating at first. I'm still not a good cook, nor is Mark Dumont, my first roommate. I'm not sure that the nutrition coach for the St. Louis Blues would have been pleased with some of our meal choices at the time.
Well, I remember you telling me once what your ritual pregame meal was, and it made me almost gag. It was spaghetti with cold sauce.
Yeah.
And
ranch dressing.
Yeah.
So you got the cold meat sauce and the ranch dressing on there, because we could boil water and we could make spaghetti back then. And that was about the top of our. I'm not telling you how good it was because it wasn't very good.
It's horrible.
It was horrible, yeah. But that's what we. That's about as far as we progressed with our culinary skills. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I never visited you for dinner.
Well, Alexander's Steakhouse is a hit, though. I love that place.
Oh, no,
oh yeah, that we could do. We could barbecue. Like there's, I'll tell you this, Dave. I had a really cool, the old style picture, albums, right? You peel up the plastic, put the picture underneath, and I have one of those, and I still don't want to admit to myself that it's lost. I'm still going with it's just misplaced. Someday I'm going to find it, but there's some great pictures. So I think we started it when I started playing with Jabber, because I'd become the captain by then. It was year 2 or 3. And so we said we would call these mandatory barbecues at our house, because Jabber and I we had a house up in North Peoria. Is that what? Yeah. And so we had this house, and our landlord lived right next door, and we had this nice covered car park, and we'd get these old briquette barbecues out there, and everyone had to come. And that's what I mean. Like, this is why I say, did it come out of nowhere? No, because we'd been doing these team building things from year 2, essentially. Right. As soon as Jabber got there and him and I were roommates, we were doing these, and we had some of the greatest barbecues of all time out there. We could barbecue. Jabber was a better cook than Doomy was. So Jabber was in charge of inside, and me and some of the other guys were in charge of outside. And I'll tell you, we had some good barbecues. But the thing was, it just brought everybody together, and Chaser would call meals at Alexander's, and everyone would show up, and we had a pretty good, even though we suffered a lot those first 2, or like my second and third year, which would be Chaser and Jabber's first and second years.
Right.
We built the foundation of a team that would do anything for each other.
So as we're laughing now, we're talking about the good times and now those bad seasons. Let's stay on that track because you're awarded the captaincy ahead of the Turner Cup year. You end up captaining the team 89-90 and then 90-91 before leaving. Going into the 18-game win streak, which is probably going to take us a good chunk of the conversation because I also want to ask you about when it was broke. But let's just stay on 89, October, November. At what point do you start, like teams go on 4, 5, 6-game win streaks, right?
Yeah.
At what point do you start going like, whoa, like we're entering some new territory? Or do you, because you know how players give the generic answer, we just take it day by day, game at a time. Is that really how you guys were? Or did you realize during it that we were doing something special?
Well, I mean, you're right. That will always be the generic. All the quotes that Dave was unfortunately given were like that up until the first couple of weeks. But we lost our first game, right? Our first home game, Kalamazoo.
Opening night.
Jabbers in net. I think they beat us 4-3 or something like that. And so we were 0-1 again. Here we go again. And I'll be honest with you, I don't remember the first week of the streak as well as I do, the next 5. I would say that it probably took us 2 weeks to figure out what was happening. And what I would say is, if we got up to 5 games, once we got to 5 or 6, I'm not saying that we ever envisioned that we'd get to 18 at that point, but we're like, oh, we got something going on here, boys. And what happened was, again, my memory's not so great that first week. Second week, third week, now just the feeling of it is that, well, everything sort of started to come together and it's like, well, now we think we can win every game. Like we let me rephrase that. Any game we're in, even if we're down 2 goals after the first period, like, now it's the game 8 or game 9 of the streak. We're 8-1 already. Someone gets up 2 goals on us, we're not panicking at all. Bobby's gone into his Jabber plays this game, Guy plays that game, Jabber plays the next game. Like, so the goalies didn't have there was no infighting or, there was competition, of course, but they knew who was going to play because Bobby just went, you're playing tonight, you're playing tomorrow, you're playing tonight, you're playing tomorrow. It was easy. But once we got a handle on how good the 2 lines were and the like all 3 lines and the defense, like once we got a sense of who we were, because you got to remember when we come down from training camp, some guys don't get there until even game 2 of the season, right? Because they're still up with the big club and they get sent down. Once we got our guys after that first game and into the first week, it didn't take long to figure that we were onto something and we were having so much fun being on this side of a winning streak as opposed to the guys that had been there the prior 2 years, that we didn't want it to end. And then it just got rolling and it took on a life of its own. I'd say at about 10. I'd say at about 8. We're like, yeah, this is something special.
At game 15, of course, that whole streak, other than the record-setting night, game 17 up at Kalamazoo, but
yeah,
game 15 was probably the most dramatic game in that streak. And of course, I remember you almost falling down at center ice waiting for that.
It's probably the one we came closest to losing.
Yeah, well, you were down 3-1 to Salt Lake at home with only 7 minutes left.
Yeah,
and I'm sitting just down the row from the great late Norm Ulrich, and I can remember how many times in those last 7 minutes of regulation that he said, "Here come the Rivermen." You guys, wave after wave, line after line, and the rest was history in that game. If the ESPN was there at the time, it would have been an instant classic. Why don't you talk about that game and how it ended?
Yeah, well, you and I talked about it last, I think, because it was the anniversary. We had an anniversary and 30th anniversary of it, and that's what I do remember is that Salt Lake, for whatever reason, that whole year gave us trouble. Right? They'd given us trouble before with the old crew in Peoria. That year too, they gave us trouble, and I think that was the first game that we had played them, because we hadn't gone out for a 2 or 3 game set out in Salt Lake during the streak.
Right.
And they gave us trouble. And like you say, they were up 3-1. And then I know for sure Dominic scored one of those goals. I can't remember who scored the other one, but we scored 2 goals in the last 5-7 minutes of the game to get her to the shootout. And I mean, that's one of those nights, Dave, and you as you were there, you remember it well. That's when we knew, like, we were already getting good crowds. Like, the crowd had built from, well, you remember my first year where we were going to fold, and the city, we were owned by the city back then, not Mr. Sowers, my first year.
Right.
And that's one of the, like, I've been in Chicago Stadium, I've been in, NHL arenas. That night, though, was probably the loudest that I'd heard. Well, it was definitely the loudest I'd ever heard Peoria Civic Center. But it rivaled when we scored that tying goal to tie it up, and it was like, this is crazy. And then, of course, you know my story where Jabber doesn't let a shot in the shootout, and Nelly scores. I think he was the first guy going. He scored. And then, so it comes to me now, this is the 4th shot. So win and we're done. And like, I like to say, I remember what exactly happened, but I was shaking. Adrenaline's flowing. I don't know where I put the puck. I just shot and it went in, and all of a sudden everyone's coming off the bench. And I've seen the video of our dream season video that Norm did. And I get chills every time, even just thinking about it. But that game 15 was unbelievable. And it was so great that it was against a team that had given us fits. The 2 teams that had given us fits in my entire 4 years there, one was Salt Lake and the other one was Muskegon. And we took our pound of flesh that year, because I think we beat Muskegon 9-2 one time in Peoria, 7-2 or something like that. We got our revenge. What goes around comes around, and we were pleased to give them both a licking every once in a while.
We worked through game 15, and then of course 16 the next night was, if I remember, it was like an 8-0 blowout to over I can't remember who it was.
Phoenix.
Might have been Phoenix, yeah.
It was Phoenix, yeah. I know this. Well, I remember it. I mean, I remembered it, but in that video, Twister scores a great goal and does a great celebration. Yeah, I think he scores goal 7 or goal
7, exactly. Where's my player of the game thing?
Yeah, no one's gonna touch him for over celebrating, right?
But
that was a good one. That was a Sunday afternoon, and it was so great. We played the other one the Saturday night, and it was a real breather. And then we had the whole week off.
Right, and that was tough because the national media by then has caught on to all of this, and you go up to game 17 at Wing Stadium in Kalamazoo, and there's AP up there. There's major papers from Canada. They're
Hockey
running.
Night in Canada was doing
Hockey Night in Canada, on the TV, and tiny little Wing Stadium. It was a crazy atmosphere, but and you had some guys called up, but you just went in and
I think that's one of the things too, that the week, like, we weren't upset that we had a week off, because I think we played 3 games in 4 nights leading up, like, through that weekend for sure, and or 4 and 5 or something like that. And the week, because the Blues are still playing, and the Blues didn't carry a lot of extra guys. I mean, times were tight back then for them, so we were all down there. So, to be honest, I was more worried that week. The week for our team was great. We got to reset, got to practice a little, get ready, and then go on the road. And the fans got into it. They were booking their bus trip up there, and a whole section. They bought a whole section full of tickets. My biggest worry was that 2 guys on the Blues were going to get hurt. They're going to take Nelson and Monji.
Right.
And, there was a real worry there. Or Vies and Brucey or Jabber or Guy. Like, we were kind of just, for, when you're down in the minors, everyone wants to get up. So if an injury happens up there, you're not hoping for injuries, but if an injury happens, you're ready to jump in. Well, this time it was like, just leave that for next week. Let us get to Saturday.
Yeah, Bobby Plager would joke all the time when the guy came down from St. Louis that he got called up to Peoria.
That's true. Yeah.
That's how good that team was. But you get through that night. It's a huge night, and I think it was Twist that picked up Bruce Sowers and put him upside down in the locker room.
But see, that's another game where we were down. I think we were 3-1.
At least 2-1 in the first period, I think.
2-1, 3-1. I think we were down 2 goals at whatever, maybe 2-0.
Yeah.
And going into the dressing room at the end of the period, and it was like, just no worry at all. No worry at all. This game's ours. We got him.
Yeah.
And we did.
You win game 18 in overtime at Fort Wayne. I think that was a Mongeau goal on the winner. And then I'll never forget, this is another lasting moment for me when I think about the streak. Coming home for the 19th game, sellout crowd, and they're out there chanting in unison. They're counting off 1 through 18.
Yeah, that was their thing.
Yeah, it was an amazing atmosphere. It was just big time. And then of course Milwaukee cheated and scored an offside goal. But
yeah, we lost that one.
So, what was the feeling when that ended?
Well, you know what? I can be completely honest with you. I've put that out of my head. That's one memory I don't really think about a lot because we've got so many great memories. There's no reason to dwell on any kind of disappointment that year because there really wasn't very much of it, right? What I remember most about us losing that game, and then we lost the next game. So now we've in our last 20 games we're 18-2, right? Because we were 18 in a row. There's these 2 games. Bobby Plager comes in and tears the strip off of us after the second straight loss, and he's like, "You guys think this season's over?" And goes into his his coaching style. We were terrified that he was going to. So it wasn't game 19 that I remember. I remember game 20, or the second loss, because that snapped us back into, okay, it's time to get really back to work. Not that we were taking those 2 games off, obviously not. We had a sellout crowd for 19. I can't really remember who we even played in game 20. But I remember that after that game, it was like, if we needed any kind of reminder about how, correctly demanding Bobby was and for all of us and what it meant, it's time to start another one. And we didn't get another big streak like that going, but we also didn't lose very many games from then on in.
No, and we'll move into the playoff experience here in a moment. But Andrew, I think want to jump in with something about Norfolk here might be good.
Well, and the reason I ask you is because, Dave, you talk about when the streak ended, you want to get that memory out of your head. I'm curious what you thought, though, because at the end of the day, you guys put together a body of work that set the professional hockey record and stood the test of time for 22 years. And I think, probably halfway into those 22 years, people are probably looking back and, I don't know if anybody will ever beat the Rivermen record. And then finally in 2012, as fate would have it, the Norfolk Admirals do it in the AHL. They go on to, I think it was 28 consecutive.
Yeah.
And much like you guys, they get that big win streak. They win a championship at the end of the year with the Calder Cup. Dave, at that point, you had retired from the game back in '98, so a lot of time had passed. But I'm sure you still have to watch hockey here and there, and maybe started hearing rumblings of it. Do you remember finding out, like, wow, we're not the leaders anymore?
Yeah. Well, to answer your first question, you can't live in Edmonton here and not watch hockey.
Yeah.
Right. I know more about hockey now than even when I was playing. But to be honest, records are made to be broken, right? Like regular season records are made to be broken. And Dave used to ask us all at the time when we were going through it, what means more, the streak or the thing? And I bet you that anyone who answered him at the time when we were going through the streak, it was just superstition, because streaks are made to be broken, or records like that, regular season records are made to be broken. The only thing that no one can break, no one can one up you on, is the fact that you won the championship that year. Yeah. I think I was either just talking with buddies or people at work, because they knew that I'd been involved with the Rivermen one when the Norfolk one was going on. And I said that exactly. I said, well, you know what? Yeah, okay, they broke our streak. Different leagues, different circumstances, different decades. You know, we're pretty proud of what we did. I know they're pretty proud. Well, and I want to be clear, what they did in no way takes away from what we did, right? Like our experience at the time was the record, and now their experience, and someone will probably break theirs. Someone may win 30, but it doesn't take anything away from what Norfolk did in winning 26 or 28 or whatever it was that they won. But the thing that when people were asking me about it, I said, well, I really hope Norfolk wins their league, like wins the Calder Cup, because you need that to make this streak mean. I mean, it always meant something. Like, it meant something even after those 2 losses. Now we're 18-3. We were 18 in a row. They were 28 in a row, 26 in a row. But we're probably not talking about the streak as much if we don't win the Turner Cup, and same with Norfolk. So I remember saying, good for those guys. I'm glad they're, it brought a lot of attention to us too, because people were talking about, oh my goodness, they're going to beat the Rivermen. And then they did. And every time they talked about it, they mentioned the Rivermen. And any time I can get my old Rivermen team mentioned, I'm all for that. Right. So, but I did hope that they won, and they did, right? Because now there's nothing like winning a championship with a group of guys. I wouldn't be talking to these guys 30 years later if we hadn't have won, right? It galvanizes the whole thing, and it's just fantastic.
You guys were, ironically, I mean, talk about hockey gods. The night they broke the record, you're all gathered over at the Embassy Suites in East Peoria, yeah, celebrating an anniversary of your streak.
Yeah.
And I can remember Plager, and we're sitting in there, watching on our phones, getting updates of that score. It was just weird. But like you said, you had to get business done in the playoffs that year. And if there was any pressure on that team, it was probably that mission. And especially when you got down 2-0 in the best of 7 to Phoenix. Yeah. And Phoenix, by that time of the year, had picked up half of Albany's team from the AHL. They made a team that
they're a pretty good team
to try to stop you guys.
Yeah.
Your thoughts about that, and then there was a special moment in that series to talk about too.
Like you said, even though we thought we could pull off a streak like we did, there's no pressure at the start of the season for anyone to go on any kind of streak, right? That just happens, and so there's no pressure. And sure, you might feel some pressure of keeping it going, but you're still just going out and playing, right? Whereas the playoffs, especially after the season we'd done, and we won in Milwaukee with 11 guys, for crying out loud. Third game,
one of whom didn't play on purpose.
Tony Henya, Bobby Dempson. And so that after the season that we'd had coming, like, the only reason we lost games was because half of our team was in St. Louis. We were playing games with 10, 11, and 12 players there for a while.
Yeah.
Coming in first by the margin that we did, and being the team that we winning 18 in a row, being the team that we were. Yeah, now you see, because now what it gives all of our opponents, well, guess what? We can knock them off at the knees. Oh, we beat them out in whatever round we're in, right? First, second, or third. No one's going to remember the Rivermen. They're going to remember them as a failure because we didn't win the whole thing. So there was real pressure when we started the playoffs. There was real pressure in round 1 against Milwaukee, like I say, because
format, yeah.
And they were a good team too, and they were our arch enemies, like our arch enemies. They would have taken extreme pleasure out of knocking us out in the first round. Like they'd still be talking about that in those circles there, right? The Admiral circles. So once we got against Phoenix, and see, I was up for, I started the playoffs and played the first 2 games against Milwaukee. And then I went up and played the end of for the first round in the NHL. And then when Minnesota beat out the St. Louis, I was up. And I remember Chaser and Jabber and I were on the plane coming back from Mini where we lost out in game 6, I think it was. And it was game 3. It was the same night as game 3 in Phoenix. So we're down 2-0. And we're like, someone's got to get us a score. What's the score? Because we were worried if we go down 3-0, 3-0's tough to come back from no matter who's playing, no matter what team you're on. And we heard that the boys had won. I think they won by 1 goal. I can't remember if it was in overtime or if it was just by 1 goal. I think it was by 1 goal. And Guy Bear made a save in the last minute, and someone knocked his glove in, but they disallowed the goal. So we come back at 2-1. But yeah, there was pressure. The boys felt pressure in that, because even though we come back, we're down 3-2 in our own barn, and Kevin Meehan scores the game winner, the overtime winner in game 6 to force a game 7. Like we were that close. We were in overtime in game 6 against Phoenix in our own barn. Of course, we had our fans with us, and Meemer scored. Like it took about a minute and a half, and Meemer scored. But like, it would have been a whole different 30 years if we lose that game in overtime, right?
Well, those guys were waiting for you in that hotel lobby in Phoenix. After you guys, I can remember the shuttle van showing up, and it swings open, and there you are, and it's like.
Well, there was Chaser, Jabber, and myself got sent down all at the same time from there, and well, for me, they'd been up for Chaser played probably half the year, well, a good quarter of the year up with the Blues, and so had Jabber. I just got called up for a week, so my heart was down here the whole time, and I was so happy to get back, and I was so happy when we learned that the boys had pulled off game 3 in Phoenix, right? And but no, there was pressure, and then Dave, there was pressure in the finals too when we kind of lost our way for a couple games there. We had a big celebration planned in Peoria, to sweep them, and or no, it wouldn't have been to sweep them. It would have been to win in 5.
Yeah,
right. You scored a goal in the opening shift of the game.
Opening shift, and the crowd goes crazy, and we're like, this is going to be 10-0. We've got it. No, nope. They were plucky. Those guys, they in Fort Wayne, they didn't quit either, and. I can't remember the exact score of that game, but it wasn't by 1 goal, I don't think. I think they.
Well, you got an empty netter up in Fort Wayne to finish it off.
Oh, in game 6, yeah. Well, but see, we talked about that, and I can tell you about that. So we lose. We're up 3-0. David Bruce has got 10 goals in the first 3 games of the finals there, and Monji's playing great. And then we lose game 4 in Fort Wayne. The refs kind of messed us up on that one, but. We lose game 4, we lose game 5 at home, which was a surprise. But it's almost, I'm glad we lost, but I'm glad that it worked out the way it did, because I will tell you this, Dave and Andrew, I have never been on a bus where, because, I'm the captain, I'm trying to, trust me, I wasn't the only captain on that team. I just had I had the letter. We had more leaders on that team, and our leadership group was off the charts, right? It was almost everybody, right? And so I've never been on a bus, because we drove up the day before from Peoria, that typically you got, you just sense that some guys aren't into it, or you're not into it, or whatever. I've never been on a bus that's been more focused in my entire life in any game of hockey. And when I got off that bus when we got off and went to the hotel in Fort Wayne, I'm like, this looks good. We're not losing this game, because the boys are laser focused, and everyone is going to be ready to go tomorrow. It was still a tough game, but we didn't lose it.
And then to exit out of this, just the parade. thousands of people lined up waiting for you. I mean, you got to have some memories from that.
Totally. We weren't sure because they actually did the parade pretty quick right after we got back,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It was like within 24 hours, I think. It was quick. And so we started off somewhere that I wasn't familiar with on these fire trucks. And there wasn't many people on the corners, right? And we're like, oh, it's too early, or people, it's people are at work, because I think it was a weekday. So maybe this isn't going to go as well as we all imagined it. And then we come around the corner down by the courthouse, city hall, where they had the big reception. And there were we just came, it was slowly getting a few more people on our way down there, but everyone was down there, and it was spectacular. It was awesome because they were building another building across the street from either where we were, the steps of the city hall or the courthouse. And they were built, and the workers were taking their lunch break, sitting on the girders, sitting on the edge with their feet hanging over, looking at us, looking down at the ceremony. So no, the parade, I can be completely honest here. The parade, from the parade until the party to the next night till we finally shut her down was pretty fun. Let's put it that way.
Of course.
We didn't get cheated. That team didn't get cheated on much of. We're going to have some fun, Dave. We had some fun.
Yep.
As we continuing this chat here with Rivermen Hall of Famer Dave Thomlinson, we get toward some of the last couple things we want to talk to you about. Some of the people we've talked to today, Dave, include Jean-Guy Trudel and Dan Hodge from back in the 90s and the ECHL era. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about Bruce Sowers, because they have spoke so highly about him, the late, great Bruce Sowers, owner of the Rivermen. What comes to mind when you think of Mr. Sowers?
Well, what comes to mind is that he's Rivermen hockey. He saved Rivermen hockey. Because I was there when he originally bought the team. I alluded to it earlier in this session, where my first year we were owned by the city, and we had city managers, and it was a political thing, and it wasn't a real good situation. We weren't a good team on the ice, and we were not pulling them in at the box office, and so taxpayers were paying money for this, and it just wasn't a good situation. And then Mr. Sowers stepped in, and, again, I alluded to the kerfluffle with Milwaukee. Well, he was right front and center fighting for us, tooth and nail against the league and against Milwaukee, and he was right. No, when I think of Mr. Sowers, I think of first of all, he saved hockey. And then he did everything that he could that year to make us a championship team. So, yeah, he's one of the, well, like I say, in my opinion, he was hockey in Peoria.
One of the things that Guy talks about, a current Rivermen head coach for the SPHL team, is that he would come after each game, win or lose, and would shake your hand, or he'd say, "We'll get him next time." Is that because you played, after Peoria, you went to a bunch of different places, played a little in St. Louis, Boston. You'd been with a number of other IHL teams. My understanding is not every owner is like that.
No, he was one of a kind when it came to owners. The only other owner that I had later on was in Phoenix. Lyle Abrahams was quite enthusiastic like that, but no one was like Bruce. Well, it was great the year that we got so many. I should have looked up our record before so I could quote it, but we didn't lose a lot of games, right? Maybe 12. And so you're talking about 7 out of 8 games. So you got half of those at home. 4 out of every 5 games at home, it's a win. So everyone's happy. And we had a crew of guys. We had a crew of old timers, awesome hockey guys that created hockey in Peoria. And then you got Brucey, and they'd all come in and they'd go stall to stall and shake everybody's hands. Right. And It was fantastic. It was just, he was part of that community, the hockey community, that, you know, he understood what it took to save hockey in Peoria and make it better. And he did it. And the whole Sowers family was unbelievable to us. But Bruce was the guy.
One of the things here is, Cleve, I'm going to bounce it back to you in a second. But, you know, here we are, 2021, and you talk about anniversaries. It's been 25 years since your induction into the Peoria Rivermen Hall of Fame back in 1996. You were still playing for a couple of years after that, but that sort of was your Rivermen career coming full circle. What was that moment like? And when did you find out you were going to be a Hall of Famer?
Well, to be honest, I think Dave let me know, and then I got the plaque in the mail, and because I couldn't come down, I don't think, for the ceremony, if I remember correctly. I was here when the whole team got inducted into the Peoria Sports Hall of Fame. Mm-hmm. That was very cool. When you get, I mean, it's that kind of honor is more important now than when I was still playing. Like, of course, it's the same honor, but you get to sort of, when you're playing for another team, you know, that immediate night's game is on your mind, not,
right.
Oh, I just got inducted into the Hall of Fame. Now, and after I retired and look back, and then we had some of these nights where they flew everybody back, and we had the Peoria Rivermen, the whole team going into the Hall of Fame, and that type of thing. It's an incredible honor. I mean, it's an unbelievable honor. It was an unbelievable place to play. I've always said this. To me, it reminded me of the places that I'd played in junior, whether it was growing up here in Edmonton, playing in Red Deer, Alberta, or Brandon or Moose Jaw. There's some great teams in Peoria as well, that, like the Bradley. Hersey Hawkins was a big deal back then, so that was going on. We had the Peoria Chiefs. I think they were single A Chicago Cubs back then. But in the winter, it did seem that we were a real focus for the sports community at the time, and it was awesome to be that. And then, like, they've given us all accolades that like, and honors that were just, it's hard to put into words, like, that you're, you know, my name's in there. I'm pretty proud of that. I know all my buddies are proud. The guys that are in there are, and the whole team, that we're all in there. And it's very, very proud to have had that happen, for sure.
Dave, why don't you just kind of briefly catch everybody up on what you are doing?
Yeah.
And your family and all that.
Well, my family's great. I'm still married to Nicole, who I got married to her the year after we won the Turner Cup. She didn't get to really participate in it live. She got phone calls and satellite feeds and all that. And we've been married. We got married in 92. I think I gotta get this right? I think we've been married 29 years this year.
This is pressure, Dave.
I know. We got two girls, 25 and 23, or 26 and 24. See, I'm blowing the family. But they're great. They're out on their own, and everyone's handling the pandemic. It just so happens that here in Alberta, they've opened schools up, and my wife's a vice principal, and my one daughter's a teacher, and my other daughter's a speech pathologist. So they're all working in the school system. So they're back at work, you know, full PPE and all that kind of thing. But they've been back at work during this time for probably since November. So it's they've been managing that. Everything's been fine. And for myself, I'm a lawyer now with a publicly traded company called North American Construction Group. We're traded on New York Stock Exchange and Toronto Stock Exchange, and it's a big heavy mining construction company. We got big trucks, and I work in the contracts department and make sure as much as I can to keep things running as smooth as I can with my boss. I've got the greatest boss in the world. Him and I worked in private practice together, and he went out there, and then I joined him, and so everything's gone pretty good. It is a little different though than playing hockey. I do play. I don't play anymore. The game beat me up enough that I think I took the right choice, and I skate a little bit. I did make an outdoor.
I was going to ask you. I mean, do you get the stick in the hand at all?
Oh yeah. Well, I'm not a beer league guy or anything. Like, I don't play in any leagues or anything, but I have a little cabin on a lake out here, and we've built what we think is one of the greatest backyard rinks of all time. We've got lights, and we've got a few pier sections for boards, and it's not NHL size, but I do have a neighbor who's a goalie, so we've got a goalie all the time. So we've played. He'll be mad at me for saying this, but I've gone roof on him a few times this year.
That's great. Well, next season will be the 40th for this franchise, and maybe this is to wrap this up. You want to give a shout out to some of the boys that you played with and shared this history with here, and maybe encourage them to come play a 40th anniversary game here if we can get one together.
Well, I will say this. I think it's May 23rd. It's either May 23rd or May 26th. I always get those two numbers mixed up. But it's our 30th year winning the cup, right? This May. And, given I know that I am the pandemic and COVID and all that has been rough for a million other reasons than this. But, I'm ticked off that it's going to mess us up. Again, any of us Canadians can't come across the border and get back, and it's just not the right time to do that. But I will tell you, when we were talking last year, when it was, because no one had any idea that we'd still be in that mess last May.
Right.
No, I don't think it would take a lot of arm twisting to get the guys, as once we get this other thing straightened out, to get the guys, a good portion of the guys to come back. I know I'd be there in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Right?
One of the coolest things about this, Dave, is you're our lone IHL representative, but here on Rivermen Day, we've had all four eras represented, a 40-year history, and we've got guys from the IHL, ECHL, AHL, and the SPHL. And I'll tell you, Cleve went there. We're kind of fourth wall talking right now, but man, I was saying, if there is ever a time to do an alumni game, imagine all these generations of Rivermen hockey getting together at Carver Arena in 2022.
Well, I'm in for it. And like I say, I would do everything I could to twist some arms and put the invitations out there. And like I say, Dave asked me to mention some names. It's impossible for me to mention all the names. The whole team was the thing. And, what I can say is I've been in touch with Jimmy Veazey, Kelly Chase, Nelson Emerson, Pat Jablonski, David O'Brien, just down the list, all of them. And Dominic and David Bruce and like I say, there were 20 of us on that text call last year. So that's what winning does. You win it, you win something, you're going to be friends for life, and we all are. So like I say, yeah, whatever I could do, if this thing gets straightened out and we can move freely around again and participate in this and have the fans out there to watch it, and because Peoria fans are the greatest fans that I experienced, you can count on me.
Well,
I will do it.
Well, there we go. Cleve, we got one yes. We got to make this thing happen.
On the way.
Yes, we're gonna show those guys from all the other leagues which is gonna represent.
Haji told me the same thing. He's like, "You want to get it? I got all the guys from the 2000 Kelly Cup team." Could you imagine the Kelly Cup champions versus the Turner Cup champions?
I would
We'll take them on.
I would pay to see it, and I'd pay to call it.
There you
I'd
go.
like to be there. All right. Well, Dave, this has been awesome. This is the interview we're going to use to wrap up Rivermen Day. You've been our longest guest out of all of them, and what a great opportunity to go down memory lane with you. And I think in future years we're going to have different guys over the years do this. Thank goodness for Zoom. It's been so much fun. So, and obviously Dave Amini and Cleve, thanks so much for helping out with this. But
Pleasure.
again, number 14, Dave Thomlinson, 96 Hall of Famer, 90 Turner Cup champion. Thank you again so much for being a part of Rivermen Day.
Yeah, I'm humbled, guys. Thanks for having me on.